Hi, Karan.
Hi, I can hear you.
I'm Amanda. Hey everybody, welcome today. Ooh, hold on one second. Hey everybody, welcome today. I'm Dr. Maggie Yu, functional medicine physician and medical director of Transform Autoimmune Disease Naturally, an online program for turning around autoimmune disease. We have a very special guest today on our show. We are welcoming Kiran Krishnan, and he I can't even go through the whole list of introductions for you, dude. We are busting myths today on probiotics and autoimmune disease. There's just so much crap information out there. So we're going to bust myths with the one and only Kiran. And Kiran's a 17-year research microbiologist who's actually focused, has been working in the nutraceutical supplement industry on the research side for the last 17 years. So he literally is the be-all, end-all, rock star geek of probiotics and nerd. So Kiran, tell us, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I've been so excited to do this. I love that you can see participants and it's live and there's so much more engagement in this. So thank you so much for having me. And I think my best and biggest credential is just being the biggest bacteria nerd you can find that can actually speak to humans. You know, because there are big nerds out there, but they can't speak to humans. They have a very hard time coming out of the lab and engaging with people. But I actually like humans. So I'm here happy to be talking to everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kiran, I'm so happy that we, because, you know, you're the rock star. I have so many fanboys in the audience right now who begged for me to interview you. You were on the very short list of people that everyone wanted to talk to.
So I'm so flattered. I love it. It only means your audience is brilliant, and and so it is absolutely my honor and pleasure to be on. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So for those of you guys who are joining us right now from Kiran's audience or from my audience, please go ahead and click the link to join us live. You can be in our green room, and in about 20, 30 minutes when it's time, you guys get to ask Kiran or myself questions live, face-to-face. Many of you haven't even met him face-to-face. This is your time to do it. So go ahead and click the link and join the conversation now into our green room. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, Kiran, with busting some myths in autoimmune disease. So my audience is people who have autoimmune disease, and they are overwhelmed with the sheer amount of information and misinformation and contradictory information that's being thrown at them. Yeah. And so I want to ask, first of all, with you, how did you fall into this arena?
Yeah, so I've always been a science nerd. I grew up in Malaysia. I grew up in India before moving to the US right before high school. And my mom is a medical doctor, and she actually had 2 clinics in Malaysia. One of them she called Clinic Kiran, was the name of the clinic, because she knew I loved the whole medical science arena so much. I used to actually go in the clinic with her and watch her do certain procedures like suturing people and so on. You know, and that always fascinated me, because I loved that she had this knowledge on how to fix things that were broken in the human body. That always became a passion of mine. So, you know, and I was always that kid that never took anything for granted. You know, I never assumed how things worked. I never just played with things without understanding how they work. I remember when I first moved to the US, it was the first time I ever saw a microwave oven. And, you know, you could put a bowl of something in there and push a button, and in 30 seconds, it's piping hot. And, you know, I would ask friends, like, you know, don't you care how that works? And nobody really cared, you know, and I'm the nerdy kind that would be looking it up and studying microwave radiation to figure out how that's actually heating up my food, because I couldn't take that for granted in my mind. You know, so that always drove me towards the science. And then the way I ended up picking microbiology was actually the first week in school. In the dorm room, they had a movie night so that everyone could kind of get together and meet each other. And the movie that they were playing was that movie Outbreak. I don't know if you remember that movie, right? It shows my age. This is when the movie came out. Morgan Freeman and Dustin Hoffman. And there was this viral outbreak that came in from a monkey virus that transformed into humans in the US. And they were chasing this virus. And some of those people from the CDC that were chasing the virus were microbiologists and virologists. And I was like, that looks awesome. That's what I want to do. So that's when I went and applied for the School of Microbiology and got into it. And the moment I got into it, it was like, love at first microscope, because it just fascinated me that so much of our world functions on this little minuscule level that we can't ever see with our naked eye. But there's so much life and function happening below the surface and underneath the surface that runs everything around us. And the deeper you get into the microbial, microscopic world, the more fascinating and archaic and alien-like it becomes. And then, of course, out pops the Human Microbiome Project that basically shows us that we are essentially 90% bacteria in most ways. And so, it all just kind of fit with my curiosity and all that so much. My focus in microbiology has always been what we call clinical microbiology, which is the focus on human disease, and understanding that there are lots of good bacteria, but also some bad ones, and understanding that role in disease has been my passion for the last, like you said, 17, 18 years.
So in a very simple way, can you describe, because then we'll go into the autoimmune disease when your immune system goes wrong, but what should the normal gut microbiome be doing? What is the role of it?
Yeah, so in fact, the gut microbiome does almost everything. It plays a role in virtually everything. It plays a role in how you sleep, how you digest, how you assimilate nutrients. It plays a role in the production of virtually every hormone in your body. It controls 80+% of your immune system. It plays a role in energy metabolism and muscle function. I mean, virtually everything. So nowadays, based on the Human Microbiome Project, we're understanding that almost 90+% of all metabolic function that occurs in the human body is coded for by microbes, by bacterial DNA. We've got 150 times more bacterial DNA in our system than human DNA. And that was really fascinating, right? Because when you look at the human chromosome, we're such advanced creatures. We're at the top of the food chain, top of the evolutionary ladder, and we've got 22,000 functional genes in our chromosome. And it sounds like a lot, but then you look at like a rice plant or an earthworm, they have 40,000 genes. So these like really simple creatures have almost twice the amount of genetic material that we do in our own chromosomes. And that's puzzling, right? You're like, how is it that we're so sophisticated? Well, as it turns out, we have 150 times more bacterial DNA in our system than human DNA. So virtually everything comes down to the bacteria. If they're not directly controlling or affecting it, they're playing at least a secondary role in how it functions. Even your outlook on life. There's been studies looking at people who are optimistic versus pessimistic. There's a role for the microbiome in that outlook in life. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about this, because for me, that's it's not a simple answer, because the microbiome and the bacteria in our environment, in our gut, does so dang much. For me, dealing with people with autoimmune disease is that a lot of people think that there's like some one answer, one Band-Aid solution, one super probiotic for everything. And the truth is even in the arena, especially in the arena of probiotics, when we're talking about bacteria, it's actually so complicated what the answer is and how those pieces all fit together that I think that's the missing, literally holy grail in autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. Is how do all these pieces fit together, rather than people searching for the one miracle solution without understanding this bigger picture of how pieces fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the immune system is one of the most complex biological systems there is. Our understanding of the immune system changes slightly almost every year. One of the fathers of immunology who discovered the T cell, the very first T cell, this was back in 1978 or 79. And when he first discovered the first T cell, he basically said, now we know everything there is to know about the immune system, right? Mm-hmm. Since then, they've discovered hundreds of other types of T cells and B cells and all of this stuff. And I remember being in school and studying immunology. Virtually every semester, you find something new and something's changing because it's such a complex, system, and it can be very individualistic. People's influence on their immune system changes based on their age, their race, their heritage, their environment, the types of microbes, of course, that they have in their system. So what we have to do when we talk about autoimmune disease from a microbiome standpoint is talk about general trends and talk about general effects that the microbiome has on the immune system, and then how we impact that part of the microbiome. Because one of the things we have to remember is 80% of your immune tissue is basically sitting in your gut, right? And every square millimeter of that immune tissue is covered in bacteria. So these immune cells have this incredible task of sitting there, playing the role of defending us, right? Defending our system. And the whole time they're covered in bacteria. They have to be able to figure out which of these bacteria or viruses or protozoas are good, which ones are bad. And as it turns out, that communication occurs between the microbiome and the immune system. So the right type of microbiome will talk to the immune system and do something what we call immune tutoring to actually teach the immune system what to attack and what not to attack. And then it can also help suppress the unwanted responses, like in the case of autoimmune disease.
I love this, the way you just described it. It's beautiful. And to me, I look at it as an analogy in this way, which is that for me, just thinking about the gut bacteria, it's so linked with what's happening with your hormones. Like hormones is huge, and it's a huge trigger of autoimmune disease. There's a reason like 80–90% of autoimmune disease sufferers are women, and they're frequently diagnosed or have worsening of it right after childbirth during certain times of the month around perimenopause, because hormones really matter. But hormones in themselves matter, but the secondary effect of why they matter is they totally jack your microbiome up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like if you've been taking birth control for a decade,
oh my gosh,
that has a huge impact on your microbiome and how it turns out, and your susceptibility and risk for a lot of chronic illnesses, including autoimmune disease, completely changes and increases quite a bit.
And then there's a whole thing with even blood sugar. A lot of things, there's so much, questions around fasting, paleo, keto, should it be preventing high blood sugar? And to me, what I have found is that there's the problem with people with autoimmune disease is not just high blood sugar, it's low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. Mm-hmm. And blood sugar, whether it's high or low, can also affect your microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of it is food and fuel for the microbiome, but the microbiome also uses sugar as a signaling compound and a compound to produce hormones out of it. The presence of sugar within the microbiome and in the blood will trigger a hormone response through your metabolism, through things like the production of butyrate that then signals your fat cells to uptake more sugar and burn, and then store sugar and then burn fat, and like all of these complex mechanisms that are going on that impact both your response to the world around you and how your microbiome functions, all work from what you're putting in your body, on your body, and what you're surrounding your body. And we could talk about that, because one of the things I talk a lot about in terms of how your microbiome is impacted is, what are the things that we're putting in our body that we know impact the microbiome in a negative way that can drive autoimmune disease? What is it that we're putting on our body that has that impact? And what is it that we're keeping around our body that has that same impact as well? Those little things are the environmental triggers, the damage that occurs over time that makes you more susceptible to autoimmune disease. Because there's one really interesting thing about autoimmune disease is your microbiome does not want you to have autoimmune disease. And in fact, in that regard, there are several protective mechanisms within the microbiome to maintain immune homeostasis. And the microbiome plays a very important role in that. And in part, it's to protect itself. Because when your immune system goes awry, it will start attacking your good commensal bacteria. And so for them to be able to protect themselves, they want to maintain immune homeostasis. And we can talk about how that happens within the microbiome and how we can influence that to happen even more.
So I think that's great. And for me, that's why a huge part of our program, what we do is called food mapping. And it's a process unique to our protocol, which is that you got to figure out which foods is triggering your immune system to go crazy and your microbiome to go crazy. And it's different for every single person, what that is. And that's why, to me, data is so important. Everything that you're talking about here, Kieran, has to do with data. You come from research and data. So one of the biggest things is for me is we cannot look at food and just tell everybody with autoimmune diseases go on an elimination diet without data.
Right. And you can't just say everyone go on a paleo diet. You can't say everyone go on a carnivore diet. It just doesn't work that way. Totally. And here's a very important thing to point out with that, right? So how our body responds to food is heavily determined by the types of bacteria we have in our system. Now, and the types of bacteria we have even just naturally before they become severely dysbiotic by all of the things that we're putting in our system, like antibiotics and personal care products and Roundup, glyphosate, all this stuff that we end up eating through the food. Before we create the dysbiosis, if you take any one of the people on this panel or in the green room and compare their microbiomes, we would be at best 50% similar. That's how different our microbiomes are from one another. If we took any two of us and compared our own genetics, most of us would be 99 to 99.5% similar. That's how similar we are in our own makeup. But then when we look at our microbiome, it's so vastly different. Some of us may have only a 10% similarity in our microbiomes, and yet we're both humans, right? And so that kind of differentiation in your microbiome shows you how different one person can react to the same diet as someone else. So this blanket dietary recommendation across the board just doesn't fit. So I love that part of your program.
It's ridiculous, actually. I think it's a big waste of people's time, effort, and money to actually tell people to go on these generalized diet that's tailored to no one.
Right.
Especially when you start to understand the microbiome and data behind all of this.
Yeah.
By the way, on your page, Kieran, Donna Pereski says glad to be watching you on your page. If people are girling your page, say hi, everybody.
Hi.
That are watching from Kieran's page, please jump on, click the link and jump on and join us in this green room so you can actually say hi to him in real life and ask him questions.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Blaze Porter, something we could dig into later is how to get rid of candida when you have such severe die-off symptoms and probiotics make your stomach nauseous.
Yeah.
Those are interesting questions. Misty Rushing is watching. Misty has a group called Scleroderma and Functional Medicine, and huge proponent. She's had a huge health turnaround using your product, by the way. And
I've chatted with Misty a few times through Facebook. So thanks for being here, Misty. It's awesome. I'm so glad to see you here.
Well, Misty was one of the ones that I think was asking for you to be interviewed.
Awesome. I'm glad.
Okay, so I would love for all of you guys to jump in and join in the conversation when it's time to ask Kieran questions. I'm going to start busting some myths right now. Number one myth. What is the number one probiotic you should take that's going to be the best for all autoimmune diseases, Kieran? Tell me now.
Oh my God, I wish I had that answer. I would be a billionaire right now, literally.
Billionaire.
Exactly. Unfortunately, there isn't a one size fits all. It is going to be a little bit more complicated. And a probiotic is not necessarily going to be the fix. It's going to be a part of a lot of other things that you do, because autoimmune is a multifactorial condition. And when you're dealing with a multifactorial condition, there's going to be multiple solutions that have to work together in order to work. Now, we love the spores, and we've done a couple of clinical trials specifically on autoimmune disease because of a couple of effects of the spores. So when you look at how the microbiome promotes homeostasis and actually can suppress the autoimmune type of response, there are a few critical, what we call keystone strains, or really important commensal bacteria that play that protective role. So number one is Faecalibacter prausnitzii. So Faecalibacter prausnitzii is one of the best potent stimulators.
Wait. Can you say that 10 times fast and backwards?
Yes, Faecalibacter prausnitzii. I actually practice this all the time. This is what nerds do on the day off. We say big, long names with too many syllables in them. But what's interesting about this bacteria is in a healthy microbiome, it can make up between 5 and 7% of your total microbiome. So it's really, really important to the healthy microbiome. Now, it upregulates a system in your immune system called the FOXP3 plus Treg system, right? So when you look at your immune system, you've got all of these immune actors that are functioning and responding to everything your body sees. So everything that comes in through your oral route, through your ears, your nose, through your skin, everything has to see an immune response of some sort. So your immune system has to check it out and figure out, is this something I want to attack or not? And that intelligence of teaching the immune system what to attack and what not to attack comes from the Treg system. That's a T regulatory cells. Now, the T regulatory cells are expressed or elevated by certain types of bacteria in your gut. This Faecalibacter prausnitzii is one of them. The other one is one called Bacteroides fragilis. And then there's a certain Clostridia cluster. And yes, I said Clostridia. Most people, when you hear Clostridia, you go, holy crap, that's C. diff, and that makes everyone sick, and you're going to get...
I think they heard chlamydia. I think chlamydia.
People are already making social plans. I can go on Tinder and pick some chlamydia up, and the autoimmune disease is gone. But no, not chlamydia, Clostridia. There's certain clusters of Clostridia that are really important for immune homeostasis. Now, what we look for in a probiotic is there a probiotic that can actually upregulate these types of microbes within your system so that they can then turn on those protective mechanisms in the immune system, right? That's the way your body controls these aberrant reactions that shouldn't be happening. Because when you have inflammation, and we all have inflammation, we have no choice but to have inflammation because we live in the Western world, which is a very toxic world. So we're just kind of fighting and balancing against inflammation all the time. So when there's inflammation, your immune system, especially your innate immune system, so your first line of defenders goes to a certain area to attack stuff. They will attack just everything in that area that they think that they believe is harmful. Some of that includes your own tissue. So as they're attacking your own tissue, proteins from your own tissue are being kicked off. And then some other immune cells will see those proteins, not necessarily recognize them as your own, and start producing antibodies and other responses to those proteins. Now, what's supposed to happen is these Treg cells are supposed to swoop in and go, hey, we don't want to do this attack, we only want to do this attack. And that is part of your immune system's training. As it turns out, we've outsourced much of that work of upregulating those Treg cells that come in and teach the immune system to bacteria in the gut. And if we don't have adequate amounts of those types of bacteria, our Treg system falls apart. And that's why when you develop one autoimmune system, you become much more susceptible to other ones as well. It's not unusual, right, for people to have lupus, then Hashimoto's, then and then a skin disorder and so on. You know, it goes down the road. It's not because you have really bad luck and overall bad health. It's just that your Treg system, which is controlled by a certain part of your microbiome, is defunct and it's not working. And so your immune system keeps making these mistakes without the correction. Yes. You know, these mistakes go on all the time, but the correction is supposed to be there to fix it.
So I love that. What you're talking about is trends in research of bacterial strains that actually can help with some of this immune homeostasis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and our whole focus with probiotics is because those strains, like you'll never find a probiotic with Faecalibacter prausnitzii in it. It's a strictly anaerobic strain. It doesn't grow well outside of the body. It's really hard to get it through the gastric system, get it to colonize. You won't see one with Bacteroides fragilis in it. It's really tough. You won't see these probiotics with Clostridia, especially Clostridia complex 8. And this very, very specific type of Clostridia. So what we need to do is figure out either probiotic bacteria, or prebiotics, or diets that enhance those particular microbes. Now, the things we love about the spores is we have specific data showing that when you add the bacterial spores, like in Megaspore, into your microbiome, it dramatically increases the growth of Faecalibacteria. It dramatically increases the growth of Bacteroides, and it can, by increasing diversity. So, you know, we're working through the process of modulating the microbiome so you have a more diverse, more functional microbiome. And then, of course, diet has a huge influence on that as well.
So I love this. We have Jacqueline Lyon who's commenting on our Facebook. She's just graduated our program. She says, yeah, elimination diet didn't work. Food mapping was everything I need to create diet crucial for me. Mm-hmm. And then she said, also, I took birth control pills for over 20 years. My autoimmune disease go hand in hand with my menstrual cycle. I got more severe after each pregnancy. And of course, blood sugar was a mess. Thanks to Maggie for balancing blood sugar, and that has changed so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and the other impact of blood sugar is, of course, the growth of fungus and, other opportunistic, fungus and bacteria that can increase inflammation as well. So there's a really important balance there.
And then Misty Rushing said, hello, y'all. I'm a big fan of Megaspore Probiotic. It helped heal my leaky gut. And then we have some other question. Frank Fregescoso on your page says, is this similar to collagen digestive enzymes? Totally different. You want to go through a difference between that and probiotics?
Yeah. So collagen, did he say collagen or digestive enzymes?
He says collagen digestive enzymes.
Oh, okay. So digestive enzymes are going to help you break down the food that you're eating. It's going to take a long chain protein that you're getting from your meats or whatever it is you're consuming, and then chop it up into smaller amino acids or little peptides, so your body has a better chance of absorbing it. There's no evidence that enzymes will impact your microbiome in any favorable way, certainly not in any negative way. So it's really a way of trying to better assimilate nutrients. The spore-based probiotics that we're talking about are really important in that they are acting like orchestrators of the microbiome. They are really good competitive exclusion bacteria, meaning they can go in and actually read the microbial environment. They can sit next to overgrown and problematic bacteria, and they can bring down their growth levels. At the same time, they produce compounds to regrow a lot of these important commensal bacteria that play these protective roles within your system. Now, it is important to bring down opportunistic pathogens or direct pathogens as well, because another big trigger for autoimmune disease are certain types of pathogens. Certain types of pathogens, even viruses, especially viruses, can trigger something called molecular mimicry. And that molecular mimicry is important because what these viruses do, they're so clever in the sense that they will spit out proteins that look like your own proteins. And that's a way for them to shield themselves or mimic themselves away from the immune system. But then the immune system gets tricked and they start attacking those particular proteins. And anywhere in your body it sees those same proteins, it starts to attack it. Whether it sees it in your joints or it sees it in your pericardium, in your brain, it doesn't matter. It'll start attacking it because the viruses, the latent viruses, the ones that are long-term chronic infective viruses, they're all trying to evade your immune system by throwing out these signal flares to confuse it. And here's the thing, the best way to defend against those latent viruses are to upregulate your immune system, especially the macrophages and dendritic cells. So these are like the soldier cells that swim around your system all day long, and they look for these types of things to basically consume, phagocytize, we call it, and get rid of them. Now, your macrophages and dendritic cells are dependent on short-chain fatty acids being produced in your gut in order to power them and provide them the fuel to go around and survey your system and find these latent viruses that are throwing off these molecular mimicry signals. So the microbiome protects against autoimmunity in a few different ways. Like we talked about earlier, Bacteroides fragilis, certain Clostridium clusters, Faecalibacter prausnitzii, Akkermansia, all of these bring down inflammatory response and they upregulate the Treg cells. It's really important for those Treg cells to go through your immune system and stop the unwanted immune responses, thereby training your immune system what it should attack and what it shouldn't. At the same time, that production of short-chain fatty acids, which occurs in your bowel also by Faecalibacter and Akkermansia, that upregulation of short-chain fatty acids actually provides the fuel that your peripheral immune system needs to go out and find infectious viruses and bacteria that are now creating this molecular mimicry that's also throwing off your immune system. So that's just a couple of ways in which the immune system plays a significant role. In which the microbiome plays a significant role. Now, Misty mentioned leaky gut, and that's really important to talk about as well, because for autoimmune disease to occur, you need that environmental trigger. And that can come in the form of a toxin. It can come in the form of food that you react to. It can come in the form of a cold or flu, anything that sends your immune system in a tizzy, if you will. Your immune system will just become inflammatory and then accidentally start attacking its own tissues. And then it starts going down this downward spiral of misjudgment. And so that environmental trigger, that leakiness in the gut, can act as a significant environmental trigger. And that LPS, the lipopolysaccharide, that endotoxin that sits in the lumen of your intestine, if that's allowed to leak through and enter your circulatory system, it's a really potent environmental trigger for starting and perpetuating the process of autoimmune disease. They've done experiments in autoimmune disease models, in mice models and so on, where if they inject LPS into the circulatory system, it triggers autoimmune response. So that's how powerful that endotoxin is. So stopping that leaky gut is also going to be critical to stopping progression of autoimmune disease.
I love that. Right now, there's a ton of people on your page, Karen. Diane Kaiser just said, big heart, thanks for doing this.
Hi, Diane. So nice to see you.
All of you that are watching right now, please go ahead and share this to your own pages or to groups of people that you know could benefit from learning more about probiotics or that have autoimmune disease. And go ahead and click the link to actually join us now so you can come in and ask us questions. We're going to do a quick break. Any of you that want to come in here right now to join our green room, you can come in here right now, and then we could start our live questions from our audience.
Awesome.
Okay, Karen. So I have anybody in our green room, go ahead. You can post your questions right now in the chat section. But I'm going to start with one from our Facebook page. Shannon Collins Cater is asking a question, which is it okay to open capsules? I have a weak esophagus that have winced since improved, but I still have a hard time swallowing capsules.
Yeah, so if you're talking about opening capsules with respect to probiotics, if it's a good probiotic, then absolutely. A good probiotic shouldn't require a capsule to protect the bacteria, because as you can imagine, our ancestors that inadvertently consumed probiotics from the environment, from the foods that they ate, they didn't have those encapsulated. So those bacteria should be designed to be able to survive through the gastric system naked without their capsule protector. And so anytime you have to add a capsule or some sort of technology to these bacteria to get them to function the way you want them to function, you're really making them do something that they're not naturally designed to do.
And then what about with or without food? That's another question I get asked all the time.
Yeah, in general, my recommendation is to always take your probiotics with food. Again, in nature, if you look at our ancestors, they didn't specifically eat certain bacteria in between meals. Everything that they got typically in terms of bacteria and other microorganisms, they got with their food. So these microbes are designed to function in the presence of food. They actually do a really great job of breaking down our food for us in our small intestines. They will trigger the adaptive immune response that's needed to build something called oral tolerance. Because part of the way foods can trigger autoimmune disease is you lose oral tolerance to certain types of foods. As you eat foods from when you're a baby onwards, your immune system is supposed to see all of these different food antigens come in, and then it's supposed to build a tolerance against that food, so your immune system doesn't create an inflammatory response to that food next time it sees it. But you lose that immune tolerance if you don't have adequate amount of bacteria that comes in with the food. So part of the consequence of this sterilized food system that we have is we lose oral tolerance, because the presence of bacteria upregulates certain parts of your immune system that help your immune system identify the foods that you're consuming and then create a tolerance to them rather than create an inflammatory response.
I love that. Thank you. We have a question next from Monica, who's in our audience, and we haven't even talked about the role of mucus yet, Karen. One of your favorite topics.
Yes, love mucus. Yes.
Monica, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? And while she's doing that, can you talk a little bit about the role of mucus?
Sure, yeah. So mucus, actually, we used to think of our skin, our dermal surface, as the largest barrier or organ system in our body. The mucosal layer is actually about 150 times larger than our dermal surface, so that's the most apparent thing we can see. But everywhere inside your body, you are covered with this really elaborate mucus system that we call the mucosa. So every orifice where things can get in, including through your skin, has to go through a mucosa. That mucosa is the true barrier between the inside of the body and the outside of the body. So anything that is outside of the mucosa, including things that are going through the hole, the lumen in your intestines, that's considered still outside of the body, even though it's very much in you. But unless it penetrates through the mucosa, it's still outside of the body. And your immune system that's sitting in your mucosa, that's the primary defenders against everything that enters your system. So whether it's food, whether it's viruses or bacteria or toxins from the outside world, anything that enters that mucosal system has to be judged or taken care of by the immune system that's present in the mucosa. There are loads of papers that show that mucosal dysfunction, so that's the immune system being dysfunctional in the mucosa, is one of the biggest drivers of most chronic illnesses, including things like severe depression. So now there are studies that show that things like depression, GERD, so gastroesophageal reflux disease, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune disease, all of these seemingly different conditions are all related in the fact that they all seem to be affected by or started by a dysfunctional mucosal response. And here's the thing, our mucosal system is built by bacteria. So we have these cells called goblet cells that line all of our intestinal lining, our blood-brain barrier, our upper respiratory tract, all of these things, the goblet cells, they produce the mucus. But in order to stimulate the goblet cells to produce mucus, we need short-chain fatty acids like butyrate from our microbiome. So our microbiome stimulates the production of the mucus that acts as that really important barrier. Our microbiome also then upregulates and tunes the immune system in that mucosal barrier as well. So if your mucosal system is defunct, then the chances of having autoimmune disease, including a whole bunch of other chronic illnesses, is really high.
So Monica's question is really good. Monica, can you speak now? Because you're unmuted. Her question is that she's taking Mega Mucosa now, and she's not taking probiotics. Do I need to take the probiotic first? So it's this whole idea of, do I supplement for the mucus layer, or do I supplement with probiotics? Do I do both, or is there an order?
Sure, yeah. So, when we created the thing called the TGR, the Total Gut Restoration System, we kind of put things in order. Now, again, everyone's different and their case is different a little bit. So you can switch the order of things around a little bit. But in general, the idea is we need to reform the microbiome first. So we need to bring up more of the beneficial bacteria that create the protective mucus layer, that seal up the tight junctions, that modulate their immune response. And that's what the spore probiotic, the Megaspore, does to begin with. So once you've taken the Megaspore for a couple of months, then you can bring in the Mega Mucosa so that the Mega Mucosa provides the tools for the microbiome to rebuild the mucus lining and rebuild the epithelium. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't necessarily get the benefit if you started with the Mega Mucosa first. In the case of people with really severe dysbiosis and those that are really sensitive to die-off symptoms and all that, we often start them first on the Mega Mucosa, because that gives you some base level of protection against the die-off and things that you'll see when you start with Megaspore. Because Megaspore will get in there and will start killing off some of the pathogenic and problematic strains. And in very sensitive people, that die-off can create, cramping, bloating, discomfort, and so on. So in those cases, we start with the Mega Mucosa first. So in your case, Monica, if you've been on Mega Mucosa, once you've been on it for, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, then if you haven't used the Megaspore yet, start bringing in the megaspore, because it'll start increasing the fecalum bacteria, the Akkermansia, the Bacteroides fragilis, all of those strains that are really important in utilizing the tools in the megamucosa to rebuild the system.
I think this brings up a really good point, Kieran, which is that I deal with a population with tons of autoimmune diseases symptoms, and a lot of them have really poor tolerability to supplements, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're addressing to the point is that preparation of the environment for the introduction of probiotics to stick or even work, or to handle the die-off from probiotics, is really key, which is, for me, preparing for that entrance is really important. And that's the pieces people forget. People think, oh, the probiotic is the answer. Or, and for me, it's like, what are we doing to prepare this environment for success? Number one is you better dang make sure you know what your food intolerances are, to make sure the environment isn't continuing introducing things that's basically messing up the immune system. Number two, you got to make sure your blood sugar is pitch darn perfect. No highs, no lows. Blood sugar control, huge part of that program. Number three is hormone balancing. You've got to balance your hormones and not be on birth control pills, not have a hormonal mess. All these pieces are really important to actually create an environment with which then you can tolerate, oh, okay, we can build the mucus. Oh, we can build, we can add in the probiotic. Oh, there might be an infection that we could deal with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of that environment, getting your environment ready, even your environment around you matters, right? So speaking of hormone balance, I mean, so many of the personal care products we have today contain xenoestrogens. Yeah. These things that mimic hormones in your body and really throw off the system. So, you have to be very careful about what you're putting on your system, to wash yourself, to moisturize. So all of this, you want to go as clean as you can with those, with deodorants, toothpaste. All of those things matter so significantly, because people have to keep in mind, there are 85,000 plus chemicals that are widely used in consumer good products, right? And none of them have been tested for how they impact your microbiome before they were put on the market. Now, research groups are starting to test those one by one and show that each of these chemicals that are commonly used actually create significant dysfunction in your microbiome. And so you have to be very careful about your environment. Now, the other thing is in your home. One of the things I always recommend to people is you don't necessarily have to sterilize your home for it to be clean. There are studies that show that households that use chlorine-based cleaners have kids with higher rates of immune dysfunctions, things like asthma and allergies and viral infections even. And so, that lack of exposure to normal bacteria that you're supposed to come in contact with on a regular basis can have a significant impact on how your environment is, prepared for you to start that healing journey. Even something simple, like a dog.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, having a dog, for example, there are studies that show that households that have dogs, which are inside-outside animals, actually have people with much better health outcomes, especially when it comes to the immune system, because dogs will go out and hopefully you're taking them for walks and they're bringing in bacteria from all over the place and bringing it into your house. So that exposure level is really important in terms of getting your system ready for the path to healing.
I'm going to talk about my own personal story here, which was when my first child was born, I had mastitis from breastfeeding, and they put me on antibiotics, and I developed a severe case of C. diff. I had the case of C. diff for 2 years, Kieran.
Wow.
And I was on Vanco like 6-7 times, and that was actually the trigger of my autoimmune disease, by the way. Right. Because I started to go into severe postpartum depression, lose my hair, gain weight. That was the beginning of it. And I know it was triggered by the use of antibiotics and the dysbiosis in my gut. And no matter how many rounds of antibiotics I was on, I could not get rid of the C. diff. It kept coming back over and over again. So finally, I actually thankfully had an infectious disease doctor that says, I'm going to take you off all antibiotics. I want you to eat organic, unpeeled fruit and vegetables.
Wow.
And take a probiotic.
Yeah.
Guess what? 3 weeks later, I was done.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Here's the interesting thing about Vanco. We're actually doing a C. diff study at Cleveland Clinic right now. And the head of microbiome research at Cleveland Clinic who's doing the study with us, she's developed a way of creating sustained C. diff infection in a mouse model, which is actually really hard to do and hadn't been done until she started doing it and publishing papers on it. The way she actually gets C. diff to infect the mouse is to treat the mouse with vancomycin first. So you treat the mouse with vancomycin, it messes up the gut enough where it makes it easier for the C. diff to take hold, right? So it's really fascinating when you think about it. So all of those, the chemistry that's going into your system will play such a significant role in your disease progression and your ability to transform and heal from it. So you have to be really cognizant and aware of what you're putting on and in your system, at least through your healing process. I know that's a hard lifestyle. That's a really difficult thing, to be so hyper aware and so hyper vigilant about everything around you, but you need to do it during the healing process. At some point, you'll be able to build more resilience where your body can handle more of these things. But during a healing process, you have to be very careful about those things.
Thank you. And then Amanda's next, and she has a question for you. And she's a #1 fangirl who said you have to interview him.
Hi, Amanda. So nice to meet you.
Hi, Karen.
Thanks
Sorry
so much
for messing up on the introduction.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Maggie, I'm one of that girl you shouldn't put on live. Yes, I have a question. I'm a pharmacist, so don't boo me.
She's a drug dealer. Oh, no.
People think I'm a drug pusher, but I'm actually not. I'm
She's a graduate from our program, Karen.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so she's reformed.
Yes, yes. I've turned. Yes,
Yeah.
I've turned. Yes. Yes, I get asked all the time, at the consultation window, what is the best probiotics? But that's not my question. My question is, what's your feeling on the refrigerated probiotics?
Oh, yeah.
You get, better delivery system being refrigerated, but after you take it, it's like, your internal body is 98.7, right?
Right.
So how can that get down to the small intestine?
So that's a really important question. In fact, that's the first question I asked myself 12 years ago when I started studying probiotics specifically. From a microbiology standpoint, I would go to stores and I would ask the clerks, what are your best probiotics? And they would always point me to the stuff in the refrigerator, and I would question them and say, why are they in the refrigerator? And they would say, well, because you have to keep live culture. And you have to maintain the live culture for them to be effective. So when you get it and when you buy it, take it home and put it in your fridge right away. And I would question them and say, okay, so if it sits at the room temperature at 70 degrees, they'll die. And the answer was always yes. That's why you have to keep it refrigerated. And so, the idea then was, if it can't survive at 70 degrees at room temperature, it's 98.6 degrees in the body. And then it has to go through a pH of between 1 and 2 in the stomach, and then bile salts, and then pancreatic enzymes, all of this stuff that's really, really bad and harsh for bacteria. How can it survive any of that? And they never had any response to it. And so right away for me, like, that's a red flag in my mind. Like, if they don't have an explained mechanism of action of how this apparently very sensitive bacteria can make it through this gauntlet that's designed to kill bacteria. I mean, part of our innate immune system is our gastric barrier, and it's designed to kill stuff. That's its job. And so if this really sensitive bacteria who can't sit on the store shelf can't make it through the gastric system, then how is it acting as a probiotic? And that was one of my biggest confusions. And so right now, I always tell people that, if your probiotic has to be refrigerated, it's more than likely not going to do anything in terms of true probiotic function. Now, that being said, there are some strains where when they die in the stomach and their components move through your digestive tract, they can upregulate some aspects of your immune system, which can be beneficial. So they're actually called metabolic response modifiers. For example, Rhamnosus GG is a strain that's well studied and used in the marketplace. And then studies have compared heat-killed versions of Rhamnosus GG versus the live strains. And the heat-killed version actually works better than the live strain version. And that's because there is some component, typically a microRNA or outer cell wall component, that actually is doing the job. It's not the bacteria going and living in the system and creating any change that way. But then the effect only lasts as that component moves through your digestive tract. Once you poop it out, the effect is gone. So those were the confounding things to me about the way probiotics are designed, is that the vast majority of probiotics in the market, neither the makers nor the users of it know how they function in the body. And that is really scary to me, because so much of how the body functions is determined in your gut. And if you're putting billions and billions of bacteria in there and you don't really know what they're doing in the gut, we could be causing problems. We just don't know that. We don't know enough about many of those strains to really utilize them on a daily basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We got 10 minutes left, everybody. So some last questions. We have Maya. Oh, Anu is next. Okay, I'm going to ask a question for her. Can you speak, Maya? Anu, I'm
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We'll
hi.
ask a question next.
Hi, I have a question. I've heard that probiotics is very important to take when you take probiotic. So can you talk a little bit about that? I'm not sure how do I take it together in the same, probiotic and prebiotic together or separately?
Sure, yeah. That's a really important question because you're going to see more and more of this coming out in the market. So a true probiotic and prebiotic has to work together in a manner that's called a synbiotic. So that's S-Y-N biotic, not symbiotic like S-Y-M. So S-Y-N as in Nancy is a term called synbiotic. And certain prebiotics work with certain probiotics. And they complement each other. So the true definition of a synbiotic is a prebiotic that helps the probiotic proliferate and survive within the gut. But the International Probiotic Association and some of the big research associations are starting to expand the definition of a true synbiotic, which basically shows that the probiotic and prebiotic have complementary effects in the gut. Now that's really important because prebiotics are basically food for bacteria, right? And probiotics are the bacteria themselves. So when you have a prebiotic that's food for bacteria that's going in and feeding certain bacteria in your gut, and you've got a probiotic going in that in itself is working through some other mechanism, if those mechanisms of action don't match, then you're creating an antagonistic system in your body. Right? If one of the prebiotics increases the production of ammonia and then one of the probiotics' job is to reduce ammonia, then you're getting a net neutral effect. So nothing's really happening within the gut. So when you're taking a prebiotic and probiotic, you want to make sure that the product you're taking has been defined and shown to be a synbiotic, meaning there's a study showing the combination of that probiotic with the combination of that prebiotic, and they work synergistically. I wouldn't go out there and just buy a random prebiotic and a random probiotic and take them together because you don't know what's going to happen in your system. And it may not be some alarming, dangerous response, but the thing is over time, those kind of ill effects can take hold and create more problems than you need. So don't just go buy prebiotic, don't just go buy probiotic. Make sure what you're buying is called a synbiotic. And there's really a very few of them out there right now. Like we are just now publishing a study on the mix of our prebiotic and probiotic. What we're showing is all of the changes that the probiotic makes in the gut, all of those favorable changes are significantly enhanced when we add the prebiotic in. There aren't any antagonistic mechanisms working when you take them both together. So look for the word synbiotic. That is going to be the next biggest thing in gut health as people start coming out with probiotic, prebiotic.
So what's the name of your product that's a symbiotic, Kieran?
It's actually the combination of the Megaspore with the prebiotic called Mega Prebiotic. Before we ever launched the prebiotic, we painstakingly looked for prebiotics that enhance the effects of the Megaspore. And we've completed a study on that, and then only we launched the product. So if you take the Megaspore and the Mega Prebiotic, that's a true synbiotic, and we'll have the publication coming out in the next couple of months to prove it.
So your products are typically sold only through a doctor's office or doctor's accounts, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they can be found on retail shelves and all that, but I think you're going to be giving your audience some access to it,
So
right?
we actually have a link. So if you go to our drmaggie.com/live, it'll direct you to our TV page, and on the link where you're seeing this show right now, there's actually a link to access Kieran's company's products. So you just have a quick registration page. Once you do that, you can see the products that we're talking about here. Anu's question is, there's quite a few people with autoimmune that have altered IgA.
Mm-hmm.
and some people with low IgA. So she says, what can you do with probiotic supplements and food to increase the weak immune system? But I mean, I think it really is everything we just talked about with the mucosal layer, all the different foods with food mapping, balancing your hormones, blood sugar, introducing the right strain of probiotics. I mean, am I right? Am I missing something, Karen?
No, you're absolutely right. And then increasing your exposure to bacteria in general.
Yeah.
So part of the way IgA works is that it's your first line of defense in terms of immunoglobulins. It's the largest volume of immunoglobulins your body produces. You produce something like 7 grams of IgA every day, and it's in all of your mucosal tissue. It's in your tear ducts, in your mouth, in your every part of the gut. And the more exposure you get to bacteria in the natural world, the more your body is triggered to produce IgA. And IgA is really important because it also covers your commensal bacteria. Because part of what can go wrong in your homeostatic system is your commensal bacteria can go too far deep into your mucosal lining. And in fact, that's how colorectal cancer starts. Colorectal cancer starts by Bacteroides fragilis and E. coli going from here to 1 or 2 millimeters too deep into your mucosal lining and causing an inflammatory response. And so that the structure of the mucosal lining protects against that. The release of IgA, which basically covers those bacteria, protects against that response as well. So it not only is needed for potential pathogens, toxins, all of that, it's also needed to keep your commensal bacteria where they need to be. So everything what we talked about, including things that suppress your immune response. So remember, all of these chemicals around you, all of the inflammatory responses to the foods that your body isn't tolerating well, all of those things suppress IgA production. Inflammation will stop and slow down IgA production. Hormone imbalances stops and slows down IgA production. Exposure to chemicals and chemical toxicity will stop and slow down IgA production. So as you start cleaning up that part of your lifestyle and the things that you're exposed to, IgA production will naturally increase. There are studies that show that zinc and vitamin C, omega fatty acids can also help your body generate and start producing more IgA. So getting some of those basic nutrients in, whether it's through supplement form or through the foods that you can tolerate, is going to be important as well, because your immune system needs a lot of energy to produce all of these immunoglobulins.
So the bottom line is you really got to put all this stuff together. And if you just hear the list of this is a master degree level training that people have to get for autoimmune disease, which is the fight of their life, which is what we do. This is not a, oh, by the way, kind of thing. And so for me, if you guys don't know about my my program, go ahead to www.drmaggie.com/live, and you can learn more about working with us. We have a last question here from Jacqueline Lyon. She's an alumni who just recently graduated our program. Jacqueline, welcome. You can ask your question.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Touch just a little bit. I just recently graduated from Dr. Maggie's program, so I'm in my healing phase, I would like to say. I've made a lot of progress, and I'm doing well. I balanced my blood sugar. I found my food intolerances. A little bit about me. I've been sick since I'm a child, and I think it's always gone to my gut. Since I'm a little kid, I was even admitted in ICU as a kid. Anytime there's a lack of homeostasis, it'll appear in my gut. And I've had gastritis. I have no gallbladder. I have no appendix. It just went on and on. My gut has been kind of like my barometer, I guess you could say. So I had spoken to Dr. Maggie last week, because I guess this is a general question where, yes, I'm doing well. And I was making progress, but I faced difficulty in my life. I lost my father recently. So grief is definitely taking a toll on my healing. It's kind of put a stop where I wasn't dealing with the grief the way I should be. And I know it's more of a mindset issue, but it affected my digestion again. I ended up in the ER with extreme abdominal pain. I couldn't digest any food. And now that I'm dealing with the grief more, it's improving. The pain's improving. But is there anything I could do? Because I mean, in life, things like this are going to happen. And they're like a digestive enzyme I should maybe do, like anything proactive I can do, as well as the mindset work I need to do to release some of the grief to help my gut health while I'm going through this.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very good and important question. And also very sorry to hear that you lost your dad. That's a really difficult thing. I lost my dad about a year and a half ago, and I totally understand what you're going through. Here's how how that life event has caused the gut issues, right? So when you understand that, then you start to understand how everything else around yourself, it could be not the loss of a loved one, it could be just stress at job, it could be your love life, whatever that triggers that kind of emotion and stress can create it. So here's two things that stress is doing to your gut that can cause those symptoms. Number one, when your body produces stress hormones like norepinephrine and all that, it actually increases the virulence of latent infections that are sitting around in your gut and the rest of your body. So there is plenty of evidence that shows that when you're under stress and you're producing these stress hormones, that actually in a way feeds virulent bacteria and viruses in your system. And then they start getting a leg up and they start producing toxins. And because that's how they fight. That's how they fight for their space, right? So you're increasing your toxigenic response in your body from these viruses and bacteria. The second thing that stress does is it messes up your tight junctions. So then it causes your gut to become severely leaky. And when your gut is leaky, your upper respiratory tract, your blood-brain barrier, everything is leaky. So now you've got an increase in pathogens, an increase in the amount of toxins that they're producing, and your system is leaky. So all of those things are leaking into your circulatory system, and they will affect your hormone balance. They will affect inflammation all over your body, and it can start pushing your microbiome into a dysfunctional spiral, right? So one of the best things, and this is something I take every single day, because I put my body through a lot of stress from all the travel that I do. I fly 300,000 miles a year. I sleep in 4 or 5 different time zones in a week. And I'm eating out 90% of the time. So besides the spores, so the spores are really important to always try to bring back your microbiome into balance. Another product we launched is called Mega IgG, and it's that bovine serum immunoglobulin. That is one of the most powerful products you can use to maintain homeostasis. Those immunoglobulins, it's a high IgG immunoglobulin. And the whole reason we even brought this product in is because I was working with another company. We were in a small research consortium for studying people with severe leaky gut in HIV. So the NIH actually published a study showing that HIV people actually die from leaky gut more than anything else. And so this company actually had this IgG, and they did studies on HIV subjects, which is a real severe form of leaky gut and toxicity. And they were able to show that they can neutralize a lot of the toxins and help rebuild and the mucosal lining and the tight junctions. So I take that as my daily protection when I'm putting my body through stress, when I'm going through ups and downs in personal life. That's one of the things that really kind of maintains balance and homeostasis. Because as your pathogenic organisms start to overgrow and they start to release the toxin, the IgG actually comes in and neutralizes them. Mm-hmm. It binds it up in the gut and actually keeps it from entering your system. This IgG also can bind mold toxins, environmental toxins that come in from food, all types of stuff, and then it upregulates your immune system to produce more secretory IgA and other protective factors. So that's one of the most important things. And then the other thing you can do, which doesn't cost anything, is fasting. So fasting will increase the diversity in your microbiome, and it gives your body a chance to rebuild that mucosa. So the digestive process is a really difficult process to your gut, right? It impacts your mucosa, it impacts your microbiome, it impacts your intestinal lining. When you give your body a break, when you have a 14, 15-hour fast throughout the day, it actually gives your system a chance to rebuild. And then there's certain bacteria that do really well in the fasted state, like Akkermansia, that promote that rebuilding. So the 2 things I do, really 3 things I do to protect my body against toxicity, protect my body against those swings in life, are I maintain the spores because they maintain the homeostasis in the microbiome. I take the IgG, which helps protect against toxigenic response in the body, and then I fast almost every day. And that fasting gets rid of the toxicity in your system. So those are the 3 main things. And I guarantee you, as you're dealing with the grief and the emotions mentally, if you start putting those three things into practice in your body will catch up with your ability to deal with it emotionally.
Perfect. Wow. Now with fasting, you said, excuse me, 14 to 15 hours a day when I'm going through something like that. I'm just looking at blood sugar wise, because that would probably crash at that point. Do you think that's a better idea, that I need to focus on the fasting more if I was really struggling like I was this past week or two?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on your body's ability to maintain blood sugar homeostasis,
Yeah.
right? So like for me, I can check my blood sugar levels after 16, 17 hours of fasting, and it's no different than after 8, right?
Okay.
Because you have something called gluconeogenesis in your body, where your body will actually make glycogen and release it into your circulatory system, or you can release stored glycogen from the liver, muscle. So this is assuming you've got good control in your blood sugar maintenance, and you've gone through the process. So hopefully you've already have good control, but start it with 12 hours, right? So the way I tell people is you do basically like an 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. fast, right? At the end of that 12 hours, if you feel normal, then the next week you can push it to 13, and then you can push it to 14, and just kind of work your way up, making sure so that your blood pressure, your blood sugar levels don't crash. Because of course you always want to maintain those key things to maintain homeostasis, but you should be able to, with a little bit of getting your body ready, to get yourself to a point where you can fast and still maintain blood sugar homeostasis.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
For these great questions, everybody, and thank you for the wonderful participation. And Kieran, you're just giving and giving. I think you could be here for 2 more hours.
Yes, I could. Yes, and if you force me to, I would.
So I want to thank you, everyone. I want to thank you, Kieran, for his amazing, generous gift of being on here over an hour already. And all the audience that's joined us on this call, half of you are alumni, thank you. And there's a lot of alumni in the comments. Those of you who are alumni, please comment your experience going through this program and learning stuff like this and applying it to your health, what that's been like for you. And to learn more about our program, you can go to drmaggie.com/live. And it's also through that link that you can also, there's a special link where because you can only access these products through a doctor. You can use that link to also access the products that Kieran's company offers as well. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night. And thank you, Kieran. Love you.
Bye. Thank you.